What's the craziest way a stranger changed the course of your day? It was a Tuesday. Not that Tuesdays are particularly memorable, but this one became the hinge on which my whole life swung. That morning, I boarded the 8:10 bus like always, earbuds in, coffee in hand, one foot still half asleep. I sat in my usual spot, third row from the back, window seat. It was the same route, same tired passengers, same distant gray sky outside the foggy glass. Nothing unusual, nothing new, until she got on. I didn't notice her at first. My head was tilted against the window, and the bus was only half full. But then she sat down, not just near me, but right next to me. That alone was strange. People avoid sitting next to others unless the bus is full. It's an unspoken rule of public transport. But she didn't seem to care. She had this air about her, not disheveled, not glamorous either, just composed. Maybe mid-30s, maybe younger. It was hard to tell. Her hair was dark and braided neatly down one side. Her coat looked old but well kept, and she wore these striking red gloves that looked handmade. She smelled faintly of cinnamon. I glanced at her, then back out the window, trying to give the universal, "Please don't talk to me" signal. But she just smiled, like she knew something I didn't, like she'd been waiting for me. "You look like someone who's about to be late," she said. Her voice was calm, no sarcasm, just a gentle observation. I blinked. "Excuse me." She reached into her large canvas tote, rummaged around, and pulled out an envelope. It was thick, sealed with a red wax stamp. She handed it to me casually, like we were old friends. "You'll need this more than I do," she said. I stared at it, then at her. "What is it?" Her eyes twinkled. "Just open it later. Not here." And then, without another word, she stood up, walked to the front of the bus, and got off at the next stop. I sat there, stunned. The envelope sat heavy in my hand, awkward and warm from her touch. I looked around to see if anyone else had noticed. No one seemed to care. They were in their own worlds, headphones, books, scrolling through phones. I should have thrown it away, or left it on the seat, or turned it in to the driver. That would have been the reasonable thing to do. But something about the way she said it, I couldn't shake it. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket. That day, I didn't get off at my usual stop. I didn't go to the office. My inbox would pile up, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Something was pulling at me. A string had been tied around my morning and tugged in a new direction. I got off the bus 3 stops later, somewhere unfamiliar, with a jitter in my chest and a burning curiosity I hadn't felt in years. The wind bit a little harder out there, like it knew I was straying off course. The street was unfamiliar, wind curling around my collar like a warning. I stood on the corner, the bus roaring away behind me, and reached into my coat pocket for the envelope. Its presence was weighty, more than the paper and wax should account for, like a choice pressing against my fingertips. I walked aimlessly for a while, unsure of where I was headed. A coffee shop on the corner offered warmth and an empty table. I slid inside, ordered something I didn't need, and settled into the booth by the window. There, finally, I broke the seal. The wax snapped clean, and the flap lifted with a soft whisper of paper. Inside was another envelope, smaller, black and unmarked. I held it in my hand for a long time, heart thumping. Before I could open it, something slid out onto the table, a photograph. And not just any photo, it was of the woman from the bus. Only, it wasn't just her. She was standing beside someone. A man tall, with a heavy coat and a familiar face I couldn't quite place. Behind them was a bulletin board covered in envelopes, each pinned carefully in rows. The same kind of envelope I now held. I turned the photo over. In delicate handwriting, it read, "Only open when you're alone and ready." I looked around the cafe. It was mostly empty, a student tapping away on a laptop, a barista restocking muffins. I hesitated, then slid the black envelope open. Another envelope tumbled out. This one was white, thicker, and had a red ribbon tied around it. I untied it slowly, as if the ribbon itself might object. Inside was a folded piece of stationery lined with beautiful, looping cursive. It read, "You've been chosen, not randomly, not by accident. What's inside will take you somewhere, but only if you let it. 12:40 p.m. Trust your gut. Don't be late." I checked my phone. It was 10:27 a.m. With the note was something else. Cash. $300 in crisp 20s, folded once and placed between the pages. And beneath that, a small city map. No street names, no landmarks. Only a thick red X inked in the middle of an unmarked grid. This had to be a joke, or a social experiment, some prank show. But there were no cameras, no snickers from a corner. Just me and the growing feeling that something had been set in motion, and I was being dared to follow. I looked again at the photo. The background, that board of envelopes. It looked like a room, maybe an office. I zoomed in. Each envelope was labeled with initials, some with numbers, some without. None with full names. And she, the woman in the red gloves, she was smiling in the photo. Not a grin, but something softer, bittersweet. Suddenly, I felt something shift. I remembered how calm she'd been, like this was something she'd done before. The bus. Her quiet presence. The way she slipped off without hesitation. She hadn't looked back. I tucked the map and the money back into the envelope, folded the photo, and zipped everything into my inside pocket. I still had time before 12:40, so I walked. The city looked different that day, not because the buildings had changed, but because I had. Every person I passed looked like they might be part of it. Was that man holding a briefcase in on it? Did the woman with the headphones know where I was going? I caught myself checking my reflection in a window. I looked ordinary, slightly underdressed, eyes too wide. But I also looked alive, more alive than I had in months. I found a bench near the edge of a plaza and sat down. My heart was still racing. The map gave no clear route, but the red X was unmistakable. I matched it roughly to the city's layout. It looked like it corresponded to an area near the old part of town, a cluster of antique shops and long, forgotten diners, the kind of place no one visits unless they're looking for something lost. The wind picked up again, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't resist the urge to follow it. The old part of town was quieter than I remembered. Time moved slower there, or maybe it just felt that way because I was looking at everything as if it meant something. I clutched the envelope inside my coat as I walked. The buildings looked weary, like they'd forgotten what it felt like to be useful. Paint flaked off old signage. Windows blinked with dust. I checked my phone, 12:06 p.m. I was getting close. The map had no street names, but it didn't need them. The intersection just ahead looked like the point where the red X would land. There was a narrow alley to my left, shadowy and silent. My eyes scanned the row of shops. One stood out, a tiny storefront with a gold-lettered sign faded by time. Jules and Sons, watch repair. I stopped. It was exactly the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing, unless you were looking for it. A bell above the door jingled softly as I pushed it open. Inside, the scent of aged wood and machine oil hugged the air. Clocks lined the walls, all ticking softly in overlapping rhythms. Some were stopped entirely. A grandfather clock in the corner talked slowly, like it was reluctant to keep going. Behind the counter stood an old man with silvery hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You're right on time," he said. I blinked. "You know me," he nodded. "You're here for the package?" I hesitated. "You're not gonna ask for ID?" He smiled, not cruelly, but knowingly. "Not necessary. She said you'd come." He bent down and pulled out a small box, wrapped in brown paper. He placed it gently on the counter. My name was written across the top in the same looping cursive as the note from earlier. No address, no return name. Just my first and last name, nothing else. I didn't move. "She said you might not want it right away," he continued. "She said you'd need a moment." I stared at the box. "What is this?" He looked at me carefully, his expression unreadable. "It's not my place to say." The clocks ticked on. I felt like I'd entered a dream where all the rules were different, not wrong, just rearranged. Time felt suspended. I took the box. It was heavier than I expected. A quiet kind of weight. Inside, I could feel the corners of something solid, not soft like cloves or papers. Something rectangular, firm and still. "She ever come here before?" I asked, looking up at him. He nodded. "Many times. But she never stayed long. She only dropped things off. Always left something for someone else." "Did she ever leave you anything?" He chuckled lightly. "Once. A story I won't tell until I'm sure someone's ready to hear it." I didn't know what that meant. Maybe I didn't want to. Outside, the sky had darkened, clouds rolling in, muffling the day. I stepped out onto the quiet street with the package still clutched in my hands. I kept walking, needing to be somewhere else to open it. Somewhere private. There was a small park a block down, empty except for a couple of pigeons and a man asleep on a bench. I chose another bench, one tucked beneath an overgrown elm. The box sat in my lap like a puzzle that would change the rules of the game once opened. I peeled back the brown paper. Beneath it was a wooden box with a brass latch. No lock. I opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them, and they were all of me. But not the me I remembered. There I was at a birthday party I didn't recognize, laughing, holding a child on my hip. Another showed me at a wedding, dressed in a sharp suit, toasting someone I didn't know. A third showed me in a hospital room, eyes red, holding the hand of an elderly woman I'd never seen before. Every photo was real, no digital tricks, no obvious edits. Polaroids faded slightly at the edges. I flipped them over, one by one. Some had dates. Some had brief notes. "You said the vows perfectly." She smiled when you walked in. "You didn't know this would be the last time." Each one was like a shard from a life I had never lived. Or maybe, a life someone thought I could have lived. At the bottom of the box was a final envelope. It was blank, no wax seal, no name, just paper. Inside, one sentence. "Would you go if you knew you were meant to?" I sat there for a long time. The air had gone still, the noise of the city strangely distant. In my lap lay the evidence of something. A thread of invisible choices, a breadcrumb trail of fates I might have chased. And that woman, the one on the bus, she had known all of this before I did. She had planned it, mapped it, handed it off to me like a baton in a race I hadn't agreed to run. But now I was running anyway. I couldn't go home after that. Home felt irrelevant. I couldn't go to the office either. The idea of sitting at my desk, answering emails, and pretending to care about quarterly reports after what I'd just seen. It felt absurd, like trying to stuff a storm into a shoebox. So I walked. I kept the wooden box in my backpack, zipped tightly, the photos swirling in my mind like fragments of a life I might have stumbled into under slightly different stars. The map, now soft from handling, peeked out from my coat pocket. I pulled it out and traced my finger along the route again, wondering if there was more to it. And that's when I noticed something, a faint line, nearly invisible, branching off from the wrecks, not a path exactly, more like an arrow. It pointed north toward an area I never had a reason to visit. Industrial, forgotten, murals and warehouses. A place of leftovers. I don't know what compelled me to go there. Maybe it was the sentence in the last envelope. Would you go if you knew you were meant to? Or maybe it was simply that everything else felt too small now. I took a bus heading vaguely in that direction, then walked the last stretch. I passed a row of buildings covered in murals, strange, beautiful images of animals walking on clouds, of skeletons offering flowers to children, of clocks without hands melting into the ground. Each wall seemed to echo something I couldn't quite name. At the corner of the block was a faded sign, Kilroy Industrial Units AF. A rusted fence surrounded it, the gate hanging crooked. I slipped through, heart starting to thump again. Not fast, but deep, like the start of something old waking up. At the far end of the lot, tucked behind a loading dock, was a door painted yellow. On it, someone had scrawled in black marker, "You made it." I didn't hesitate. The door creaked open into a wide, high-ceilinged room lit by strings of mismatched bulbs. Tables were set up along the walls, cluttered with old typewriters, broken radios, glass bottles filled with rolled-up notes, and pinned to the far wall, floor to ceiling, were maps, dozens of them, city maps, country maps, subway systems, all marked in red and black ink. In the middle of the room sat a woman. She was not the woman from the bus. This one was older, gray-haired, wrapped in a shawl the color of dried leaves. She looked up as I stepped inside, her face unreadable but kind. "You're earlier than I expected," she said. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. She gestured to a stool beside her. I sat. She picked up a box, identical to the one I had opened, and placed it on the table. She said, "You might need more convincing." I stared at it. "She? The woman from the bus?" She nodded. "She said you were different. That you'd follow the trail?" I felt dizzy. "What is this? What is this whole thing?" She tilted her head slightly. "How do you think lives are changed?" I didn't answer. She continued. "Some people need money. Others need a reason. Some just need a sign. You needed a question you couldn't shake." I swallowed. "So what, this is a game?" She shook her head. "It's a message. A long one. Told across time and places, through hands that don't belong to any one system." I didn't understand, but I also knew I wasn't supposed to. "Not yet." She pushed the box toward me. "Go ahead." I opened it. Inside were three things: a trinket dated for that evening, a silver locket with a black and white photo of a boy inside, and a slip of paper with 2 words, "He's waiting." I felt a surge of heat in my chest. "Who is?" But the woman just stood up. "She said you'd know when you saw him." That was all she offered. No further instruction, no final flourish. She walked to a far wall, sat down in a rocking chair, and closed her eyes as if her part was done. I left the warehouse with the ticket in my pocket and the locket in my hand. That evening, as the train pulled away from the city, I stared out the window, heart full of questions I couldn't yet name, chasing a stranger's breadcrumb trail into the night. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back. The train pulled into the station just after midnight. The platform was empty, save for a lone vending machine humming beneath flickering lights. I stepped off into the cool night air, the ticket still warm from being clutched too long in my palm. The locket thumped softly against my chest. I had slipped the chain over my neck without thinking. The boy inside the photo looked young, maybe 9, with a crooked grin and eyes that felt eerily familiar. Outside the station, a single cab idled at the curb. The driver rolled down the window before I could speak. "You're gonna, Jules?" he asked. The hairs on my arms stood up. "Yes." He didn't ask how I knew, and I didn't ask how he knew either. He just nodded and motioned for me to get in. We drove in silence. The city we entered was unfamiliar, smaller, older, the kind of place that had once thrived around a single industry and then slowly faded when the world moved on. The streets were narrow and the buildings leaned slightly inward, like they were tired of holding themselves up. After 15 minutes, the cab stopped in front of a shop that looked almost identical to the one I had visited earlier. Same gold lettering, same dusty window. "Jules and Sons Watch Repair." My pulse quickened. I stepped out, expecting a sense of déjà vu, but what I felt was deeper, like a memory not quite mine was rising to the surface. The shop's lights were on. I pushed the door open. The same soft chime greeted me, and behind the counter stood another man. Not the old one from before, but younger. 30s maybe. He had the same wire-rimmed glasses and a posture that suggested he'd been waiting for me far longer than he cared to admit. "You've got something for me?" he said gently, like it wasn't a question. I nodded and reached for the locket. He extended his hand and I placed it in his palm. He turned it over, studied it. His eyes didn't widen. No recognition, just calm. "He's my brother," he said. I blinked. "What?" He looked up. "The boy in the photo? He disappeared 27 years ago." I staggered slightly, unsure whether to sit or run. "My parents never stopped looking," he continued. "They even kept the shop running. My father was the first, Jules. When he died, I took over. Not because I was good with watches, but because I thought maybe someone would walk in one day with something like this." I wanted to speak, but nothing came. Instead, I just listened. "The woman who gave it to you?" he said. "She's part of something, a chain. Messages passed from person to person, sometimes literal messages, sometimes moments." I finally found my voice. "Why me?" he smiled faintly. "Why any of us?" She said you would ask that until now. "She knows a lot." He nodded. "She does? But she also listens? That's rare." He moved behind the counter and returned with a small leather-bound book. He flipped through pages filled with dates, names, scribbled notes. Near the back, "She left this for you," he said, and slid a slip of paper toward me. Another note, in that same looping cursive. "You brought him closer. That's enough. Now go to where time waits." I stared at it, confused. "What does that mean?" He looked at the wall behind me. I turned. A massive wall clock, antique, its hands frozen at exactly 3:33. He reached underneath the counter and pressed a button. With a low groan, the back panel of the wall creaked open. A hidden door. A narrow hallway lay beyond. "I don't know what's back there," he said. "Only that she said you'd know when to stop." I stepped through. The hallway was dim, lined with shelves of broken timepieces, pocket watches with cracked faces, Mantel clocks missing pendulums, and at the end of it, a door with no handle, just a brass plate that read, "The Listening Room." I pushed. The room inside was empty, but not silent. A soft ticking surrounded me, the sound of hundreds, maybe thousands, of clocks ticking in perfect rhythm. The floor was carpeted. The walls were draped in velvet. In the center stood a single wooden chair and a table with an old rotary phone. I sat. The ticking grew louder, synchronized like a heartbeat. I waited. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time was no longer linear. Then the phone rang once, twice. I picked it up. No one spoke on the other end, but I could hear breathing, and then, just before the line went silent, a single whisper, "Keep going. You're almost there?" I stood, heart pounding, the phone still warm in my hand. The room, the clocks, the hallway, it all felt like a test. Outside, the night had deepened. I stepped back into the shop. The watchmaker was gone. The shop was dark, and outside, on the sidewalk beneath a flickering street lamp, was a backpack leaning against the wall. Beside it, a burner phone and another note. I crouched slowly, my breath caught in my throat. The backpack was plain. Canvas forest green, the kind favored by hikers or students. It looked too ordinary for the weight I knew it carried. Beside it, the burner phone lay face down, screen dark, and the note, crisp, folded once, slid just underneath the strap. I picked it up first. The envelope was unsealed this time. Inside, a single card, blank except for one word. "Tonight." I opened the backpack. Inside, the contents were arranged with strange precision, not packed, but presented. On top was a change of clothes, dark jeans, a hoodie, and a plain black cap. Beneath them, a flashlight, a packet of granola bars, a bottle of water, and tucked in the side pocket, another envelope. This one was thick. I opened it carefully. Inside were 3 separate items: a photograph, a handwritten letter, and a narrow key, cold and heavy in my palm. I examined the photo first. It was a man, late 40s, maybe 50s. His face was angled slightly toward the camera, smiling faintly, like someone who wasn't used to being photographed but didn't mind it. Behind him was a tall iron fence and a sign that read, "Welcome Center." No location was listed. I flipped it over. A date, April 18th, no year. The letter was written in the same looping cursive I'd come to recognize. The woman's handwriting. "This is Thomas Vale. He doesn't know what he's waiting for, but he waits anyway. He was supposed to be someone else once. Tonight you'll remind him who. Use the key. Trust the clock." I read it twice, then again. It made no sense. But somehow I knew it didn't have to. Not yet. I turned on the burner phone. It blinked to life. No passcode, no wallpaper. Just a blinking dot on a map app. A single location marked 10 blocks away. No name, no directions. Just the red dot pulsing like a heartbeat. I zipped the backpack and began walking. The city had quieted. Streetlights hummed above empty sidewalks, and even the occasional passing car seemed reluctant to break the stillness. The streets grew narrower. Buildings sagged under age. I passed shuttered storefronts and darkened diners, each one watching me pass like silent sentinels. The red dot guided me to a small plaza tucked behind a chain-link gate. I pushed it open. The gate squealed but gave way. The building beyond was unmarked. Maybe a community center, maybe something older. Its windows were lit from within, soft yellow glow filtering through dusty panes. And there he was, the man from the photo. Thomas Vale, sitting on a bench just inside the entrance. He was staring down at his hands, fiddling with a rubber band. He didn't look up when I approached. He looked tired, not exhausted but soul tired, like he'd been waiting too long for something that might never come. I cleared my throat gently. He looked up. His eyes were gray-blue, clouded slightly at the edges. His face twitched with recognition, not of me but of the moment. As if this arrival, had finally broken a cycle. "Are you with her?" he asked quietly. I didn't know how to answer. Sort of. He nodded. I didn't think she'd send someone. Not again? She said it was time. He gave a dry chuckle. They always say that. Still, I waited. I sat beside him. For a moment, we said nothing, just the wind and the faint creak of a nearby swing set shifting with the breeze. Then I handed him the key. His hand trembled slightly as he took it. This goes to the clock? I raised an eyebrow. What clock? He pointed across the plaza. There, beneath a wooden awning, was a massive standing clock, carved with vines and dials. An antique, its face was blank, no hands, just a hollow ticking sound that seemed to come from nowhere. He walked to it slowly, inserted the key into a panel at the base. A soft click. Then the sound changed. A groan, like gears reawakening. A low hum began to rise, and then light. A small compartment opened beneath the face of the clock. Inside, another box, small, wooden, identical to the ones I'd received before. He took it out with reverence, held it close. "It's mine," he whispered. "I left this for myself years ago." I watched as he opened it. Inside was a photo of two boys, him and someone else. And a letter. He didn't read it aloud, he just smiled, eyes wet with the kind of sorrow that's too long buried to explain. He turned to me. "She did this," he said. "She made this happen. She said you were supposed to be someone else once." He nodded. "Yeah, I was supposed to leave. To change everything. I didn't. I stayed. I forgot. But this reminded me. I didn't fully understand. But maybe that wasn't the point." He handed me a piece of paper from the box. "For you?" On it a single phrase. "Deliver the next moment?" He nodded toward the bench. A manila envelope had appeared there, sealed. "She left that while we were talking," he said. I picked it up. My name on the front again. And underneath, in smaller print, "You're almost there." The manila envelope felt heavier than it looked. I held it in both hands as Thomas turned away, lost again in his own quiet redemption. I thought of how he'd said it. She made this happen. That same woman whose name I still didn't know, who had slipped onto a bus seat beside me as if by chance, who had mapped out a course I hadn't known I was walking until I was already far from shore. I didn't open the envelope immediately. Instead, I wandered. The streets were even quieter now, the kind of silence that presses into your ears. My shadow moved gently across empty windows and cracked sidewalks. I didn't know where I was heading, only that I needed to sit before I opened anything else. I needed the world to be still. I found a bench beneath a street lamp. One of those older iron ones, with a yellow glow that made everything feel like a forgotten photograph. I sat down, my fingers broke the seal slowly, reverently. Inside was another stack of photographs. I froze. Because they were of me again? But not just me. This time they showed moments that couldn't have happened. Me on a beach I'd never visited, sitting beside a woman I didn't know but was holding my hand like we'd known each other for years. Another photo showed me holding a child, a girl with braids, while surrounded by snow, laughing as if the world outside didn't matter. Each photo was impossibly intimate. Private, there I was in a bookstore, glasses on, reading to a small group of children. A garden party at sunset, candles flickering. In one image I was older, graying, slightly hunched, but happy, hugging someone tightly outside what looked like a small home with wind chimes on the porch. I flipped each one, looking for dates or messages. Many were labeled with nothing more than times. Before she told you, 10:31 a.m. When you said yes, 30:27 a.m. After you knew. One photograph made my breath catch. It was of me, in the very clothes I was wearing now, standing on a rooftop I didn't recognize, staring at the sky. Alone. The timestamp read just minutes ahead of the present moment. I turned it over. In careful writing, "Go there now." I looked up, instinctively scanning the skyline. In the distance, several blocks over, a building rose slightly higher than the others, its edges softly illuminated by a flickering neon sign. It looked familiar, though I couldn't say why. My feet started moving before my brain caught up. When I reached it, I knew. The stairs inside creaked, the elevator looked too old to trust, so I climbed 5 flights, 6, until the rooftop door stood before me, slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The wind met me like an old friend. The city below twinkled, a patchwork of lives still unfolding in rooms and windows I'd never enter. But this place, this moment, it had been prepared for me. On the far edge of the rooftop, a chair faced east. On the seat, a thermos and another photograph propped carefully against it. I picked it up. It was the same image from before me, on this very rooftop right now. This photo was still warm. Recently taken, my breath caught in my chest. I turned in a slow circle, eyes searching the shadows for movement. But there was no one else here. Still, I could feel her presence. The woman, her fingerprints were on everything, her silence louder than any shout. She hadn't just found people who needed saving. She'd created a path made from fragments of what if, from unspoken possibilities made tangible through photos and envelopes. I opened the thermos. Coffee, still hot, just the way I drank it. There was something else beneath the chair, another note, smaller this time, taped to the metal leg. These aren't the lives you missed. They're the lives still waiting. You decide what to take with you. I sat down slowly. The wind moved through my sleeves, curled around my ankles. For a long time, I did nothing but watch the lights. I tried to understand what it all meant. The photos, the man in the plaza, the clocks, the whisper through the phone. And somewhere in the quiet, a new understanding settled. These moments weren't dreams or illusions. They were blueprints, emotional messages from a stranger who had somehow seen a different version of me. One who said yes more often, one who followed his gut, who didn't let the routine strangle the unknown, a version who had chosen to live sideways through the unexpected. The burner phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message had appeared, though no number was attached. It read, "You're ready." I stood. The city stretched out before me like a waiting hand. I descended the rooftop stairs slower than I'd climbed them, each step resonating like the ticking of a clock that no longer measured time but choices. The city was no different than before, still busy, still breathing, but I had changed? Not in the dramatic sense. There was no revelation, no crescendo, just a quiet unfolding, like a flower opening beneath a sky that didn't notice. At street level, the burner phone buzzed again. Another message, answer when it rings. No matter where you are. I walked without purpose. I didn't need one now. The path would find me. My feet carried me through a district I didn't recognize. Brick facades, closed diners, an empty laundromat with clothes still spinning behind glass. Everything looked paused, waiting for some unseen signal to resume. And then I saw it, a payphone. It stood alone on a cracked sidewalk, leaning slightly like it had been neglected for years, the kind of relic you walk past without thought. I might have too, if it hadn't started ringing. Shrill, persistent. I froze, then stepped forward. The handset was worn, plastic yellowed from sun and time. I lifted it to my ear. "Hello," I asked. Nothing at first, just a low hum, almost like breathing. Then, her voice. "You did better than I thought." I nearly dropped the phone. It was her, the woman from the bus, the red gloves. The eyes that had seen through me like glass. "I don't understand," I said. She replied, "Not yet." "Who are you?" A soft laugh. Not mocking, sad maybe, tired. "I'm no one, just a hinge, a doorway. Same as you are now." I pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Why me?" "Because you kept asking questions even after the answers stopped mattering. Because you paid attention when no one else did." I said nothing. "I'm leaving," she said finally. "You won't see me again." The weight of that sentence landed hard. But what is all this? The envelopes, the man on the bench, the photographs, were they real? "As real as the moments you didn't take," she said. "As real as the ones you still can." I shut my eyes. The street felt colder now. "Why tell me this?" "Because it's your turn now." I heard a shuffling sound, then what might have been wind. "You'll receive one more thing," she said. "Then, you choose what to do. But it has to be soon. Dusk is the edge of the page. After that, everything resets." "What does that mean?" She paused. "It means some stories close before we know we were in them." Then, the line went dead. I stood there holding the receiver to silence, my reflection wavering in the scratched plastic casing. I lowered the phone and stepped back. On the sidewalk behind me, somehow without my hearing a single step, was another envelope. This one was different. Not thick, not padded, just a letter. Handwritten on the front. "Your turn." I opened it. Inside, a card with a street address, a location not far from where I stood, and one line of text. "The next message waits. You decide who gets it." I swallowed. She was gone now. Her part in this strange symphony had ended. But she'd left me the final note to play. I walked toward the address, the city growing quieter, the dusk thickening around the edges of buildings. The last light of the day painted everything with a melancholy hue, like the world was holding its breath. The building I arrived at was unassuming, red brick one-story, boarded windows. But the door was open, not wide, just enough. Inside, it was empty, save for a table in the center, a small lamp casting a circle of light, and a single envelope, blank, waiting. And I knew, in that strange, certain way I had come to trust, that this was mine to deliver. To who? That was the question. It didn't matter. Or maybe it mattered more than anything. I picked it up. It felt exactly like the one she had given me on the bus. I sat at the table. I reached for the pen lying beside it and I began to write. When I finished writing the letter, my hand trembled slightly. It wasn't from fear or uncertainty, but from the weight of what I now understood. I was not at the center of this story. I was part of a current, and that current carried many others. Some upstream, some downstream, and now someone, somewhere, was waiting for their current to shift. I sealed the envelope, left it under the lamp, and stepped out into the evening air. The street had emptied completely, the sky now a shade deeper than blue, tipping into night. The burner phone buzzed again. Just once, a new screen appeared, a coordinate pin with a timestamp. 9:13 p.m. I checked my watch. It was 9:01, 12 minutes. The map showed the location, just over a mile away. I started walking fast, heart pacing with each step, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to be late. Not now. The route took me through parts of the city I didn't know existed, under a bridge with ivy climbing its spine, past a church that had no name above the door. A mural of a girl with eyes the color of fireflies stared at me from a crumbling wall. It felt like she blinked as I passed. I arrived at the building just before the timestamp. It was a parking garage, not abandoned, just quiet, multi-level, the kind of place that echoes. The burner phone pulsed again, directing me to the top floor. The stairs were steep, each footstep bouncing off concrete. When I reached the rooftop level, I paused. The wind here was colder, wide open. The city spread around me like an open hand, and in the center of the rooftop was a duffel bag. Beside it, another note. I approached carefully. The wind flapped the corners of the paper like impatient fingers. "You're the last before the shift." I opened the bag. Inside was another phone, this one brand new, fully charged, and next to it a smaller envelope marked only with the initials KW. I didn't recognize the name. Beneath the envelope, wrapped carefully in cloth, was a small wooden box. I knew it before I touched it. The same kind that had arrived at the watch shops. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I lifted the second phone. Its screen blinked on without prompt and opened to a message already typed into the notes app. "She's in the alley. Red coat, don't miss her." I turned slowly, scanning the edge of the rooftop. No one. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught movement below, a figure slipping into the alleyway adjacent to the garage's side entrance. A flash of red. Without thinking, I raced down the stairs. My legs moved on instinct, faster than thought, driven by the sense that if I missed this moment, it wouldn't come back. The alley smelled like wet stone and copper. At the far end, beneath a flickering light, stood a young woman, early 20s maybe, red coat buttoned to her throat. She looked lost, pacing with a phone pressed to her ear. I hesitated. She hung up, frustration etched into her brow. I stepped forward. "Excuse me," she turned, startled, clutching her purse. "I don't mean to frighten you," I said quickly, "but I think this is for you." I held out the envelope marked KW. Her eyes widened. "Did she send you?" she whispered. "I don't even know her name." She reached out slowly, fingers trembling, and took the envelope. Then, to my surprise, she began to cry. Not loudly, just a soft, shuddering gasp. "She said someone would come," she said. I thought I didn't believe it. I thought it was just something she told people. I didn't know what to say. "I'm supposed to leave tonight," she said. I was gonna back out. I was afraid. "What's in the envelope?" She shook her head. "I don't know yet. But she said when I got it, I'd know for sure." She looked up at me. Her eyes were tired, not from lack of sleep, but from holding back too much. "Thank you?" I nodded, and in that moment, it was like I could feel the current shift again, the invisible thread tightening, then relaxing. Another connection made. Another page turned. As I stepped out of the alley, the burner phone buzzed one last time. A new note appeared on the screen. "Return to the place where you first paused." I thought for a moment. The coffee shop, the envelope, the beginning. I found my way back to the coffee shop without needing the map. I remembered the exact street, the angle of the sun that morning, the way the window fogged as I sat with the envelope unopened. It felt like a different life, not just a different day. But the street looked the same. The same flickering neon in the bakery across the road, the same newspaper stand with curling edges of unsold editions. The coffee shop was still open, light spilled onto the sidewalk, warm and inviting, but I didn't go inside, because I saw him. The man in the alley. He leaned against the brick wall beside the coffee shop, hidden in the shadows cast by the awning. At first, I thought he might be a drifter, someone resting or waiting for someone inside. But then he looked up, directly at me. There was no surprise in his face, only recognition. "I was starting to think you wouldn't make it back," he said. His voice was low, deliberate. Not unfriendly but measured, like he was careful not to say too much too soon. "Do I know you?" I asked. "Not yet," he replied. "But she told me you might be the one." He stepped forward. In the glow of the street lamp, I saw his features more clearly. Mid-40s, worn eyes. A scar across one eyebrow. He wore a coat that had been patched more than once, and gloves without fingertips. But there was something composed about him, like he'd been living between the cracks for a long time and knew the rules no one else remembered. "She left you the box, didn't she?" he asked. I nodded. "I've had 3. Then you're next." "Next for what?" He gestured toward the alley behind him. "You've come this far. Might as well see it through." I followed. The alley was deeper than it looked. It curved sharply after a few yards and opened into a small courtyard hidden between buildings. A metal fire escape clung to the wall like an afterthought. On the far side of the courtyard was a wooden door slightly ajar. He pushed it open and motioned for me to enter. The space inside was dim. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, illuminating a circle of dust in the air. A folding table sat in the center. On it a corkboard covered in string, maps, Polaroids, and lists of initials. My eyes scanned it quickly. A web of connections, names crossing names, dates scribbled in pen. It was meticulous, obsessive. He closed the door behind us. "She was part of something," he said. "So was I. So were others. We call it the chain. But it's not a cult, not a religion. Just people. Trying to keep things moving." "What kind of things?" "Messages. Moments." He pointed to a photo on the board. One I recognized, the man from the bench. "Thomas Vale? She saved him," he said. "You delivered the final piece." I stared at the board, tracing lines with my eyes. I saw faces I didn't recognize. Others I did, the woman from the bus. Several photos. Always slightly blurred, as if she refused to be caught fully. "You're saying this is organized?" "Not in the way you think. There's no leader. No headquarters. Just momentum. One person reaches another who reaches another, like falling dominoes. Except each one gets to choose how they fall." He handed me a binder. Inside pages of handwritten notes, names, drop points, times. "She left this with me last year," he said. "Told me to wait for someone who'd come back with photos of lives they didn't remember living." My pulse spiked. "She meant me?" He nodded. "And now it's your turn to choose." He reached under the table and pulled out a metal case, plain, rectangular, heavy. Inside were more envelopes. Blank, sealed. Each labeled only with sets of initials and city names. "You can walk away," he said. "No one will stop you. But if you don't, you'll take one of these and you'll pass it along. At the right time. To the right person." I looked down at the case. It looked like responsibility. But also, strangely, like purpose. "What happens if I say yes?" He shrugged. "Then someone else's life might change. You'll never know how, or why. But they will. That's enough for some of us." I stared at the envelopes. So many initials. So many cities. So many strangers waiting on the edge of something they didn't even know they were about to lose. Or find. He stepped back, giving me space. I reached forward and picked one. It was labeled LR. Charleston? I didn't know who LR was, but they were next, and I was already becoming part of the chain. The man walked me to the edge of the alley again, back into the street lamp's glow. His footsteps echoed faintly behind mine, but he didn't follow me further. He stayed where the darkness began, watching. I didn't ask him what would happen to him now. He'd done his part, just like she had. That was the pattern. The chain always moved forward. I held the envelope marked LR, Charleston, carefully as I boarded the midnight train. It felt more fragile than the others, as if it knew it carried a heavier weight. Charleston was several hours away. I didn't sleep. I stared out the window, letting the blur of dark trees and highway lights pass, like memories I hadn't lived yet. There was no message this time, no coordinates blinking from a screen. Just the initials and the destination. I didn't even have a name, no photograph, no face. And yet, when I stepped off the train at dawn, I somehow knew where to go. It was intuition now, or maybe muscle memory from lives I never remembered living. The city greeted me with soft light and salty air. The streets were quieter here, less rushed, more observant. I wandered the historic district, letting the envelope guide my steps like a compass that pointed toward possibility. I passed bakeries with windows fogged from morning warmth, children walking to school, couples holding steaming coffee cups, and then, in a small park near the harbor, I saw her. A woman in her early 30s, maybe. She sat alone on a stone bench, staring at a brass plaque beneath a willow tree. Her expression was still, not sad, but deeply still, like someone waiting for a tide that hadn't come in. Something in me settled. This was LR. I approached. "Excuse me?" She looked up. Her eyes widened, not in alarm but in familiarity. "I think this is for you," I said and offered the envelope. Her hand shook slightly as she took it. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't ask why I had it. She only opened it. Inside, I knew, was the message I hadn't written. Something the woman, the one with the red gloves, had prepared long ago. Meant for a moment neither of us could have anticipated. LR read it in silence. Her breath caught, and she pressed her fingers to her lips. She looked up at me. "She knew my brother?" she said. "He died last year. No one else knew the thing in this letter." I waited. Let her speak if she wanted. Let her keep the rest if she didn't. "She gave me a map once," she added. Left it in a bookstore. I thought it was just a kindness. I didn't know it meant I was part of this. You are? I said. She looked back at the envelope. Then at me. Then what happens now? I didn't have a perfect answer, but I repeated what the man in the alley had told me. You choose. You take something. You give it when it matters. She nodded slowly. Then, I guess it's my turn too. I left Charleston later that day. There was no new note, no photo, no more burner phones, just quiet. But in that silence, I realized something. The message hadn't been in the paper, or the envelopes, or even the strange directions. The message was in the action, in the decision to go, to follow, to trust a path not fully visible. It was, in the purest form, an act of faith, and maybe that was the point. Back home, I placed the box, my original wooden box, on a shelf beside my books. I didn't hide it. I wanted it to be visible, a reminder, not of the mystery, but of the possibility. Some nights, I dreamed of her, the woman on the bus, in red gloves, in an alley, on a rooftop, always one step ahead, always disappearing just before I could ask one final question. And in every dream, she smiled, like she knew I'd found the message she had tried to leave all along. Weeks passed. Then a month. The world didn't change around me, not in the way that movies or fables might suggest. No fireworks, no newspaper headlines, no curtain lifts revealing some secret organization or final twist. Life just moved on, but I did not entirely. I found myself scanning crowds differently, looking twice at people on buses, waiting even subconsciously for a new envelope to appear on a park bench or under my coffee cup. I carried the memory of her, not just her face but her rhythm, her way of entering and exiting the world as if she were gliding across time instead of walking through it. And then, one afternoon, in the most ordinary way, she surfaced again. It started with a book. I was in a second-hand bookstore across town, one of those quiet places where every floorboard creaked and every book seemed to carry someone's forgotten story. I picked up a worn hardback with no dust jacket, a collection of letters by anonymous travelers. The kind of book you'd only notice if you were already looking for hidden things. Inside the cover was a handwritten note. If you've read this far, then you already know. The script was hers. There was no doubt. Beneath it, a pressed red leaf, like the gloves she wore, as if it had been placed there to preserve something more than color. The owner of the bookstore, a woman with silver braids and kind eyes, noticed me lingering. She left that? She said softly. I looked up startled. She who? The woman only smiled. She comes in sometimes, leaves notes, pays cash, doesn't stay long. I stepped closer. Do you know her name? She never gives it, she said. But I've seen the envelopes. She always carries them in a red folder. Same one, every visit. The bookstore owner led me to the counter, rummaged beneath it, and pulled out a slip of yellowed paper. She left this a few weeks ago, said someone would ask. On the paper, in that now familiar looping script, was a single line, the name doesn't matter, the question does. And beneath that an address. I went. It was across the river, in a neighborhood I hadn't visited since childhood. The building was an old boarding house, Victorian style, half renovated, half forgotten. I knocked on the front door, though I half expected no answer. But someone did open it. An older man, thinning hair, slight limp. You're here for her, he said without hesitation. I nodded. She lived here? He said. Upstairs. Room 3B. She's gone now, left months ago, but she told me someone might come looking eventually. Did she leave anything? He led me up the narrow stairs, the carpet worn thin, the door to room 3B open with a creak. It was empty, except for one thing. On the small desk by the window sat a single envelope, my name on it, no return address, no other markings. I picked it up and sat down on the edge of the bed, still covered in plastic, as if waiting for the next tenant who would never know who'd slept there before. Inside the envelope was a letter, her last to me. You followed, you delivered, you changed more than you saw. I wasn't always like this. I used to wait. For letters that never came, for people who never returned, for answers that never arrived. Then someone gave me a map, like the one I gave you, and I began walking. Each time I gave a message, I became less lost. I saw lives open like flowers, slowly, then all at once. Not every message was understood. Some were thrown away. Some were never opened, but some bloomed into the next person, like you. This isn't about saving people. It's about reminding them they're not invisible. And now you know. So choose, fold it all up and tuck it away. Or find the next envelope and begin again. I never got to say goodbye. Point. Red. That was all. No signature beyond that name. Not a real name. Just red. It fit. It didn't need more. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Outside, the wind shifted. A single leaf floated across the window pane, crimson and dry. The end of one story, and maybe the start of another. A year passed. That might seem like a long time, but in the rhythm of healing, rediscovery, and quiet reflection, it was barely a breath. I went back to my regular life, but I was never the same inside it. I still took the same bus sometimes, passed the same coffee shop, walked past the same bookstore, now and then hoping I might see her again, but she was gone. Or maybe she had simply stepped out of my part of the chain. For a long time, I didn't receive another envelope, and then one cold morning in late October, a small box arrived at my apartment. No postage stamp, no delivery slip, it had simply been placed outside my door. The handwriting on the top, soft and fluid, was instantly familiar, just my name. Inside was a letter, the final one. It was different this time, not instructions, not a task, a confession. I almost chose not to speak to you that day. You looked like someone who was too tired, too rational. I've made mistakes before, handed off envelopes to the wrong hearts. But when I sat beside you, something shifted. I wasn't supposed to keep going either. I was meant to leave the chain, pass my role to someone else. But I lingered for you. You reminded me what it felt like to want a life that was still writing itself. I watched from afar, the way you opened the boxes, the rooftop, the alley. I even saw you hand the envelope to the girl in Charleston. That moment, it sealed everything. It told me I could finally stop. You are the last person I'll ever guide. And this is the last message I will ever send, not for someone else, not to deliver, but for you, to thank you, for listening, for seeing me, for stepping out of the line and walking into the unknown. I am not asking you to continue. I am reminding you that you already are. Beneath the letter, tucked into the bottom of the box, was a photo. It was me, seated on the bench near the bookstore, envelope in hand. That first day, that first morning, I was staring into the distance alone. And next to me, out of focus, was her, standing just behind the bus stop pole, waiting, watching. She'd been there the whole time. The truth settled around me like early snow. She had never needed to say goodbye. She had already given me everything I needed, and maybe that was all any of us could do for each other. These stories aren't about magic or destiny. They're about small moments, chances to reach someone, to remind them they matter, even if just for a breath in the passing storm of their life. A stranger on a bus, a map with no names, a whisper over the phone, a photo from a life never lived. They don't always make sense when they arrive, but in time they reveal who we really are and who we might still become. I kept that final letter framed on my desk, and every few months, I leave an envelope on a bench. No instructions, no signature, just a map, just a chance. Because someone somewhere is waiting for their day to change. And maybe, just maybe, it will begin the same way mine did with a stranger. And a seat on the bus? I lost a year of certainty, of schedules and safety. But what I gained was something I didn't know I was missing. Wonder and connection. The fear wasn't in losing control, but in discovering how little control had ever mattered. She never told me who she really was, and maybe that was the point. Her name didn't matter. The message did. We are all part of something invisible, passed through simple acts. Giving, guiding, trusting. And the craziest part of all, it only takes one stranger, one unexpected moment to start the ripple. So next time you find something left behind, a note, a photo, an envelope, ask yourself, what if it was meant for you?